Humans have an endless habit of building highly complex systems to reach the Creator. We construct towering architectural marvels, engineering massive spires and intricate domes to house the divine. Inside and around these structures, millions of people gather. They follow highly organized, rules-based religious systems, tracing ancient rituals step by step in an attempt to connect with something larger than themselves. You can see a microcosm of this complexity in the ancient ashrams. Picture a space filled with brilliant scholars and an esteemed guru. These men dedicate their entire lives to analyzing incredibly dense, layered scriptures, trying to decode the exact nature of God through pure intellect. But within one of these ashrams lived an anomaly, a young boy everyone called Bondu. He was an illiterate orphan tasked with scrubbing pots and cleaning up after the cows. He was entirely detached from the world, so detached, in fact, that he didn't even know his real name. The scholars relentlessly mocked him. While they engaged in rigid, high-level philosophical debates, Bondu lacked even the most basic worldly knowledge, happily ignorant of the complex religious frameworks happening right next to him. This setup creates an uncomfortable question. Do our vast systems of intellect and ritual actually build a bridge to ultimate truth, or do they simply construct a labyrinth that keeps it hidden? The answer arrived on an otherwise normal morning. The guru was delivering a passionate lecture, vividly describing the exact physical appearance of Lord Jagannath, down to his large, round eyes, his bright yellow dhoti, and the specific peacock feather resting in his crown. The scholars in the room nodded along. They treated the guru's vivid description as a profound metaphor, a poetic abstraction to be debated, cross-referenced, and analyzed for the rest of the day. Bondu's reaction was entirely different. He took the words literally. When the guru mentioned that God roamed the nearby forest herding cows, Bondu accepted it as an immediate material fact. He immediately abandoned his daily chores. If the creator of the universe was hanging out in the local woods, Bondu figured he would simply walk in there and introduce himself face to face. Society usually dismisses the inability to distinguish a philosophical metaphor from reality as sheer foolishness. Yet, in this case, completely missing the metaphor allowed Bondu to entirely bypass the paralyzing barrier of overthinking. Bondu arrived at the Bandarvan forest carrying no grand temple offerings. He brought only two things, dry roti and raw green chilies. He sat down and waited with the unyielding stubbornness of a child whose friend is late. He simply refused to eat a single bite until his companion arrived, bypassing any ritualistic intent in favor of raw, personal expectation. A timeline illustrates the cosmic contradiction. In Hindu cosmology, time divides into massive eras, yugas. God's physical manifestation occurred in the Dwapara Yuga, thousands of years before Bondu's present day. God noted this mismatch. The boys searched for a reality that no longer existed. But God faced a dilemma. To the boy, the guru's words were the absolute, unquestionable truth. To honor a belief that pure, the divine would have to bend its own rules of time and space. When a believer treats a teacher's word as an absolute material fact, the divine is forced into a choice. Either the word must become false, or the laws of time must break. In Bondu's case, the universe chose the latter, proving that even the rigid boundaries of a yuga can dissolve when confronted by a heart that knows no doubt. God materialized in the forest, and instead of dining on the elaborate 56-course feasts constantly offered to him in grand temples, the Lord of the universe sat beneath a tree, eagerly chewing on dry bread and spicy green chilies. That simple meal held a philosophical weight the temple feasts lacked. It was completely devoid of the ego of a grand ritual. Bondu offered the food as an equal, expecting nothing in return, creating a pure peer-to-peer friendship. That friendship was immediately tested. When Bondu asked God to come back to the ashram, God refused. Bondu didn't react with subservient begging. Instead, he threw a tantrum, threatening to pack up his cows or s'enreverdant completely if his friend didn't listen to him. In this dynamic, absolute vulnerability functions as a form of power. By discarding the pretense of rigid obedience to an authority figure, Bondu gained a unique kind of leverage over the divine, the leverage of a true friend. Back at the ashram, the guru sat entirely alone. He represented the absolute pinnacle of intellectual devotion, yet his hands remained empty. Then the silence broke. Bhandu walked out of the forest and directly into the ashram, physically carrying the creator of the universe on his back. The guru fell to his knees in tears. Decades of strict renunciation, rigorous study, and punishing discipline were entirely outmatched by a few days of pure, unadulterated innocence. Historical records of this event note that shortly after this miraculous encounter, Bhandu departed the physical world alongside the divine, never returning to the ashram again. In life, in faith, and in love, we constantly build intricate intellectual walls to find the truth. We analyze, we structure, and we complicate. But the truth ultimately responds to radical simplicity, arriving only when we empty our minds and open a pure heart.